It is cold. It is dreary and dark and windy. It's just miserable as we're on the brink of the winter solstice. What is a gardener to do? I never had this problem when I was in Florida because it was always sun in Florida every day, and the longest growing season of any place I ever lived. And in the winter, when I wanted to do anything, I could grow pineapple in the planters on the lanai. In Albany, there is no pineapple growing. So what do gardeners do? Well, one thing they do is talk about gardening, and that's what I want to do in this chapter of On the Brink. I brought two of my friends and colleagues from the Albany County, New York Master Gardeners. Sarah Foster is a former art teacher. You should see the worms she draws. They are masterful. She's still got it. She's also a master gardener, knowledgeable not just in art and designing programming on gardening for kids, but and composting. And composting is also the specialty of Ronnie Siegel, my second guest. She is a former nurse who now nurses the land. She's also a master composter. You're gonna hear about that a lot later, so I won't talk about that now. Also works with children, does masterful tours of the facility and the gardens. They're two of my favorite people at Master Gardeners, and I think after this episode, they might be yours also. So, Ronnie, I want to start with you. Judith Federley, who is another colleague of ours, has a wonderful blog about gardening as well. She calls this the Solstice of rest. It's a signal to slow down. And I know you have something of the same thought. Tell us
Yes,
about
I
that.
do, Rosemary. I thoroughly enjoy gardening. I thoroughly enjoy the four seasons, but I always love the first snowfall because that tells me put the tools away. You can sit and relax, look out the window and dream about the spring and not feel guilty about it at all. As gardeners, I know Sarah and I talk about this quite often. Oh my God, we have to weed. Oh, we have to do this. The chores are accumulating, and it's always a busy day in the garden. But when it's winter, it's not, and you can just sit back and dream about the future and not feel terribly guilty for it.
I don't feel guilty so much as restless. I do like to spend, and I would spend at least 2 hours outdoors every day, except in the worst kind of rain. We certainly had that this past year. I work out rage by pulling up weeds. I name them after my enemies or people annoying me and rip them out. And digging holes is very therapeutic, and I don't have that in the winter. Sarah, are you a rester or you can't wait till the first signs of spring?
Well, I like to start seeds this time of year, so I'm
Oh, yes.
still actively gardening. I have to tell you also, I have a tiny little pineapple plant in the kitchen window.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh, no, I'm gonna have to try. Is it one that you got from the supermarket and cut the top off and put in dirt?
My neighbor gave it to me, and it was really struggling until I put it outside with all the rain we had this summer. And this year, it looks like it's finally taking off.
That's hilarious. But you do bring up the topic that I wanted to begin with. You conducted a program, Sarah, at Master Gardeners just a week ago on winter sowing, which I have never done before. Now I have this row of cut up milk jugs outside my house. Can you run our listeners through this? There was a lot of interest when I posted on Facebook about sowing seeds in winter. So do a mini course right here. How to winter sow in 25 words or less by Sarah Foster.
A lot of, especially native seeds, need the freeze thaw cycle to break the dormancy of the seeds and to crack the seed coating so that the sprout can emerge. So we plant seeds inside little mini greenhouses made of milk jugs or distilled water jugs. The soil is in there, the seeds are in there. We put the seeds on the top of the soil because the freeze thaw will help the seeds figure out the depth they need to be at. So it's all up to them. And they're out in the southern exposure of my house where they'll get access to sun and rain, and they'll be there until the seeds sprout when it warms up in the springtime.
It just seems like a miracle, as I say. We had 20 women in a room last week cutting up milk jugs and planting seeds. Do you remember that, Ronnie? What stood out to you as we did that? It just seemed we had so many seeds too.
Well, I would just like to mention that there's a phenomenal program that has been in existence for several years now. It's called a Vegetable Project. And last year, we worked with kids from Albany City Schools in elementary through middle and high school, over 600 kids that we did winter sowing with. And the focus of that program was to give inner city kids who may not have had any experience whatsoever with gardening or growing to experience handling soil, handling seeds, planting them in these same jugs, and then putting them outside and watching them germinate, and then having the kids eat them and taste them and see the process. Yeah. We use mostly greens, so it was, kind of a quick fix. Unlike the natives, which sometimes may not germinate until the end of the season or later in the season, the greens are wonderful because there's basically, no fail system with spinach and arugula and all those. Mm-hmm. So that is like a really great program to do.
Sarah, you work on winter sowing all year, really, because you collect seeds. Don't you have a garage full of like those milkweed fluffs all over that you've been collecting?
I do. I have the milkweed fluffs, and it's like the Lucy show whenever I go to get them. They just float around in the garage or wherever I am. I figure they'll find their space, and if it's a good one, they'll sprout.
The natives are particularly interesting because they're tough. We master gardeners, and I want you both to talk about this, promote the use of native plants rather than the exotic, pretty and nice smelling exotics that you can find in nurseries, or even worse, plain old grass that we're all hung up on. Talk about the natives. They need this. They need this cold winter to break open their seed coats. And then they can survive anything, floods and lousy soil and bad gardeners.
The natives are amazing. I planted a native garden around a new area of our yard, and they have, in one season, they exploded. I mean, it looks like that garden's been around for years. They do, very well because they're native to your area, and the pollinators who are attracted are just amazing. The numbers of caterpillars and moths and different kinds of insects and birds. It's just a truly remarkable experience. But one thing that I think might scare people away from natives is that they feel like they have to rip up all of the plantings that they've had previously in other garden arrangements. Doug Tallamy, who is the founder really of the native plant movement, he has a very practical approach to working with natives. And what he says is, don't feel like you have to go in, rip up everything that you have. If something dies, replace it with a native, which is a very rational approach to gardening. There are different styles of gardening. You drive through different neighborhoods. You see some people who just have incredible numbers of ornamental grasses planted. That was a certain style, 15, 20 years ago, people went wild with ornamentals. But then they just take over and they're impossible to get rid of. Different kinds of styles, different kinds of traditions, different kinds of areas have different methods of planting. But I think with natives, it's just a lovely way to garden. So many of the nurseries now, the local nurseries in Albany, have native sections where you can really, pinpoint what is good for your area, for the kind of lighting, the kind of soil, the kind of, if it's a wet area, if it's a dry area. It's a lovely way to garden, but don't feel like you have to pull out what you have.
That's Ronnie. That is Ronnie Siegel that you are listening to. She is a master gardener. When I took the master gardening training 2 years ago, I came home after the first class and said, everything out in my backyard has to go out. That's exactly how I felt. Everything was invasive or foreign, just completely the wrong thing to have here. But yeah, you have to just do it piecemeal. Before we go any further, Sarah, can I get you to tell us a little bit about the Master Gardening Program? I'm throwing around that term because we know it, but I'm not sure all our listeners know. What is a Master Gardener? We don't really know everything. I just pretend like I do sometimes.
Master gardener is someone who is, let's see, I guess you call it like a consumer horticultural liaison or a turnkey trainer for gardeners to educate people on best practices for gardening, and that includes all of the kinds of plants and all of the kinds of pests. And we are through Cornell Cooperative Extension. I think it was the 19 teens, maybe. There was a land grant college system set up for this kind of consumer horticultural education. And Cornell is the sponsor in New York State. So we work under the aegis of Cornell. We have access to their research and training, and it's invaluable.
Again, another misconception I had when I began was that when I was done with the training, I would know the names, including the Latin, of every single plant and would never make another mistake. I would never have a dead plant, or I'm looking right now at a very droopy house plant. It's distracting me as we talk. That's not exactly it. These women I have found, and men, we do have both, are into experiments, and they try wild colors and textures. And if it doesn't work out, they just rip it out and start all over again. It's very adventuresome. So, Ronnie, let me come back to you because we're talking about how beautiful natives are. Styles are designed for, to appeal to all of our senses. But winter gardens, if you're a master gardener who uses natives, they're pretty ugly. In fact, neighbors have been known to complain about our gardens. And this is the way they're supposed to look, right? You're not supposed to go cut everything down and clear it away. No more of that. Talk about that a minute, Ronnie.
Well, with the natives there, as with every method of gardening, there are different opinions on how much you should cut back. The Xerces Society, which is the national organization that promotes moths and butterflies, they have something on their website that shows you what method you should use for cutting back your natives. So it's like a 3-year plan for cutting back your natives. So the first year you cut back, half of them, and you leave the stalks half full length and the others cut down so that insects can hibernate in those stalks. They like the stalks that have the caulky pith in them. And then you allow those to stand the next season, and you let them stand all summer, and then you cut a certain percentage of those back again the following season. In the meanwhile, you have another season of your plants growing that grow into that, and it's kind of disorganized, shall we say. It's not like your traditional English garden that's heavily manicured.
That's for
sure. One of the concepts of native gardening is that you just have these massive plantings of varying heights. You try to clump the same colors together to attract pollinators. And then the way that you give it a little bit of order is you put an edging around it. So the edging makes it look a little finished, as opposed to just making it look kind of chaotic. But
edging is to reassure your neighbors that this is not just a weedy mess. You have a plan.
But there, as with everything, there are differing opinions about how much to cut back and how much not to cut back and how much an individual person can tolerate. Around the area in the back of my house where I have this new native garden, I don't cut very much back at all because it's only my husband and myself looking at it. Right. In the front of the house where, we do have neighbors, I try to make it look a little more presentable. I cut back about half of it. But honestly, there are, I'm sure there are some native gardeners who are very intent about the amount that you should cut back. But in my mind, gardening is all trial and error. And you try one method one year and you may have success. The next year you do the same method and it may be a dismal failure. So, you have to work through the methods and see what's the most successful.
So gardening is a long-term project. We're going to talk more about winter sowing and planting and even composting in winter in just 1 minute. And our Mayo on the Brink is brought to you by Orchard.There LLC. And this is exciting. From January through April, it's offering reduced pricing for short-term rentals of its beautiful Karen's Place retreats in the woods of Burlington. I've been there. It's gorgeous. Karen's can accommodate up to 12 people, and they take individual bookings too. And parts of all the proceeds, always, they give to the Alzheimer's Association. For more information, go to Facebook. Facebook.com/Karen's Place VT, capital VT. And Karen's, let me tell you, is KARINS. Peacock Pots is a founding sponsor of On the Brink. Be sure to go to their website. It's peacockpots.com if you're looking for kind of unique holiday presents. I love they have these stoneware mugs, bowls, plates. I'm going to spend my entire salary this week there, I'm sure. Welcome back to On the Brink. We're talking with master gardeners today about what they do in the winter when there's no gardens out there. They're buried under snow. Well, not this year. This year they're drowning. Mine is a pool right now. We're talking about you can't really plant, although there are plants that survive and do very well in the winter. I'm just learning about this. I am a new master gardener, but I know that you guys must know about things like winterberry and witch hazel, which frequently it doesn't bloom until mid-November. In fact, this year it's coming out in this area around December. Do you have plants in your gardens that you design specifically so there's color in the winter? Let's talk with Sarah Foster first about this.
I haven't really gotten anything large enough to have actual winter color, but I do have winter texture and shape and sounds.
Oh, that's pretty cool. What are the sounds of winter?
Well, Baptisia, the seed pods rattle nicely, and then
neat.
The wind in the pines. I'm kind of in the woods, so. But my witch hazel, yes, is blooming right now. I can't figure it out.
I want witch hazel. It's very late this year, but it actually is not expected ever to bloom until October to November. It's a late bloomer. Ronnie, how about you? Ronnie Siegel is another master gardener, as we all are. Do you have plants in your backyard designed? I do. I planted evergreen trees. I figured I would have green. My mother gets terribly depressed if she just sees sticks and gray. So now there's at least a few bright splashes of color. What have you done in your backyard?
I planted probably about 8 red twig dogwoods in the front 2 years ago.
That's nice.
And they really are lovely. They're just starting to turn red now. The dogwoods also have another one. It's kind of a greenish yellow that gets a bright color later in the fall, early winter, as does the red twig. It turns redder. So that adds color, even though it's the actual branches that are coloring. There aren't any leaves or anything on it other than the branching, but the branching does look really lovely, especially after a snowfall. The contrast is beautiful.
Oh, that's great. The other place that we get color at this time of year is in the catalogs. My first catalogs are beginning to come in. Can you talk a little bit about which ones you would recommend to people who are new and how you plan what's going to happen in the summer from these books you get in the dead of winter? Ronnie, you go first.
Well,
you just gave me a nice book, so I have to ask you.
I shared my favorite catalog with Rosemary last week. We were lucky enough to receive 2 copies of the Baker Creek heirloom seed catalog. I don't know if did you get a chance to look
Oh,
at it?
yes. I've been lusting over it.
Oh, yeah. They have some truly remarkable. Now, these are not native seeds. These are exotic seeds. But if you're interested in planting 5 different kinds of arugula, this is the catalog that you look to. I wanted to plant some exotic okra for a friend of mine who loves okra. I've seen okra. I've never eaten okra, but I planted okra for her last year, and I found some beautiful red okra seeds that I planted for her, and they're absolutely the most beautiful, exotic looking plant. They have this huge yellow flower with a red neck. Oh, they're just lovely. And then the plant and the okra pot itself are red. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that you have to pick them when they're very small. Otherwise, they're pretty woody and tasteless. So I've learned for next year how to properly grow okra.
I do try a couple of exotics every year, more just as you say to experiment because the flowers and the blooms are so amazing. I try artichoke, and I was just unlucky because the season was about a month too short to actually go to anything real. But the catalogs are great for that. You look at them in the beautiful, lush pictures and say, "How could I fail at that?" Sarah, do you have a favorite catalog?
I look at lots of different ones. I look mostly online to
Yeah.
just to see if there's anything else that I need. I have limited space, so it all depends on what seeds are available and at the time that I need them. I've already planted my garlic, so I'm waiting for that to come through.
That's in
And
September. Yes, I realized falling asleep the other night. I woke up, sat straight up, and realized I had not put fertilizer in with the garlic when I planted it. So I don't know what's going to happen this year. I'm worried about my little garlic out there under the water.
Oh, you can still sprinkle some on it.
Can I? I'll do tomorrow.
I wanted to say with the garlic, and I do it with the raspberries also, is one of the I like to put the fertilizer down over the snow in the spring because then you can see where you're putting it, and as the snow melts, it gives a nice gradual fertilizer drench to the plants.
And what you've seen, ladies and gentlemen, is how Master Gardeners really works. That was the transference of knowledge from an expert to a novice. And they do it for free, despite being experts, which makes them perfect candidates for my podcast where I don't pay panelists. Along with seed catalogs, I find that master gardeners have a lot of cookbooks open in the winter, and they're using stuff they grew or plan to grow, whatever, to make recipes. Sarah, you have given us some really great recipes in the past. Weird things like sorrel soup was one that I have a recipe for you. Can you talk a little bit about that? What's your favorites?
Well, I came to being a master gardener because I'm a foodie after a long career in the restaurant industry before I became a teacher. And I've also been a slow food advocate for a long time. So it got so slow for me that now it has to start in the soil. I don't know. I'm a little obsessed with greens. I still have some of this year's, well, I have enough garlic to last me through the year every year. I have some honey nut squash that I grew that's still hanging around waiting for Christmas dinner. And I'm trying to think what else is going on, but I really like cooking produce and eating produce, so it makes a big difference. I will be starting microgreen sprouts soon, so there'll be something not iceberg lettuce.
Yeah, I would have you do a mini lesson in that, but that is all over the internet. That's really taken off this year. It's very easy to grow microgreens. You don't need a lot of lighting or special equipment to do that. Just whip it up in the front porch or back down in the cellar. So that's really cool. Let's do composting, which is something that you both are really heavily involved in, and you need heat for it. You don't have heat in the winter. Can you compost in the winter? Ronnie Siegel first.
Well, my husband and I are both vegetarians, so we have a lot of kitchen scraps that we collect on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And we have a massive bin in our garage. We've tried many different methods on how to handle our winter scraps when you can't take them outside easily. And so we have this massive bin out in our garage that we dump every few days, our kitchen scraps that we keep in a container under our sink. And we put that in the garage. And then as usually it takes about 3 months for the bin to fill. And after 3 months, my brave husband lifts this massive bin up, puts in the wheelbarrow, and then puts it out in our huge tumbler. And then that's the beginning of our spring composting, usually late winter, early spring. Sadly, this tumbler that we've had for 10 years, it's an old metal tumbler. We noticed this year it started rusting. And so fortunately, many of us master gardeners were able to participate in a program on composting in the fall where we all got these lovely new composters, these tumblers. So we will now have 2 tumblers operating, a rusty metal one and a new plastic one. But really, you can, the ground is probably not frozen at this point. So you could continue to do trenching, which I know is Rosemary's favorite method of composting, which
I love
all you
trenching.
need is a shovel.
All you need is a shovel and some garbage, and you go out and you dig a hole or a little trench, a long trench, about 18 inches deep. So you don't, you won't smell it, and neither will your dogs or the neighborhood raccoons. And you put the garbage in there, cover it up, and within just a few weeks in winter, of course, I'm sorry, in summer, but it'll take much longer now, that turns into beautiful dark soil. It's amazing. It's magic. Sarah, what Ronnie's describing is almost industrial grade composting. My goodness. Are you as elaborately outfitted as that?
Yes, I've been composting, I think it's been 40 years now. I have a big plastic bin, and I try to make sure it's mostly empty going into the winter, and then I just fill it all up. And if it freezes and I can't turn it or aerate it, I wait until it thaws out to do that, but there's at least somewhere to put it, and then it's all in reserve for when the weather warms up and the compost will happen.
Yeah. I just throw stuff out, and I have a big bin. In fact, I found the lid out in the middle of the lake today. So the wind, and I don't know what's going to happen, but but that Master Gardener has taught me that that's okay. I'll just experiment. Whatever I get, I'll scrape it all together in the spring, and we'll see if we can't make compost out of it. You know what I'm going to ask next, Sarah. This is what she is famous for in Albany County. She is a red worm wrangler. You do a form of composting involving other creatures besides humans. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we have a colony of red worms or red wigglers, and they live in our compost demonstration garden area in the summertime. They won't survive temperatures below 40 degrees, so they move into the Master Gardener lab and live under the lab bench all winter. They still need to be fed and cared for. They do provide us with worm leachate, which is the liquid that runs off of the food that they consume and excrete. The leachate is a marvelous soil conditioner, so we do get some benefit from keeping the redworms, in addition to the way that they constantly will consume produce scraps. They're amazing. And they're also kind of our show ponies. We like to take them out and do the rounds to schools and other.
Oh yeah, the little kids eat that up, don't they?
Kids love that.
I'm a little bit worried that listeners are going to think when you say the worms live in the lab that we like let them loose and they run around the floorboards. Can you describe the little box set up there.
They have a little condominium. It has several floors, and they have different uses for different floors. We kind of let them figure it out on their own. And we do harvest the castings. Sometimes people, you'll see worm castings for sale in garden centers.
For a lot of money.
For a lot of money. And I can't quite figure out how it works, because you want to use them when the microbes are still alive. And if you dry up the worm castings, you've dried up the microbes.
Right.
So the fresh kind are better for our plants.
Okay, we are going to take a short break, and we'll be back in 1 minute with more on gardening and composting and keeping busy as a gardener, even in the cold weather. Music for our On the Brink podcast was composed by David Keckley, and his works are available through Pine Valley Press. It's a Williamstown, Massachusetts music publishing firm. On the Brink is also proud to be sponsored by, I also have to say, I love being fed by them as well, the Apple Barn and Country Bake Shop. That's in Burlington, Vermont. They specialize in delivering the real local Vermont. For like a half a century now, locals and tourists, all of them, have found their way to the barn. I'm sure it's by following the scent of those pies and donuts, which are irresistible. That's the Apple Barn. Their website's easy to find. It's just all one word, theapplebarn.com. I encourage you to go there and go to the real place. This is therapeutic for me today, this chapter. I am talking with two expert gardeners, Sarah Foster and Ronnie Siegel. They are friends of mine from the Albany County Master Gardener Program. They have been gardening far longer than I have, and with a lot more skill. And so I'm trying to take advantage of it. I almost wish we had a call-in feature this week, so you could call in. I know you would have questions for them as well. Instead, you're just going to get mine. I'm dealing with a horrible mess in my backyard. This terrible extreme weather has turned it into, I keep calling it Lake Armayo. My neighbors are calling it that now too. That's how bad it is. I think I'm going to have ducks soon. And so what can I plant? What native plant can I put back there to hold a lot of water? And I'm thinking of loosestrife.
Oh,
That's Ronnie, what do you think of that?
Invasive. No. How about swamp milkweed?
Yeah, that it's water. I mean, does that grow in a pond?
Yeah.
Okay.
Swamp milkweed is great. Swamp milkweed is a miraculous plant. It's called swamp milkweed. It thrives in swamps, but it also does really well in very dry environments. It is just one of those, blockbuster plants that are remarkable. They have a beautiful flower, has a very
great smell.
Yes, cinnamony vanilla scent, and the pollinators love it. It's food. It's the only food that monarchs will eat, and they're just great. You should plant a whole bunch of those. Did you do any winter sowing with swamp milkweed?
I did. I don't know if I have enough, but I will put as much as I have in there. Absolutely.
Perfect.
It's really great. One thing that we have to talk about is the fact that it's winter. It's not winter like we used to have when we were kids. And climate change has made a huge difference here in winter and in what grows here and in what thrives here and attacks what grows here. We're talking a lot about that in Master Gardeners too. We're getting children to stomp on spotted lanternflies. And what changes have you seen, Ronnie, in your gardening and at the Voorheesville Center for CCE? What do you see?
Well, I know that our zone just changed about a month ago. We used to be 5B,
Yes.
and now we're 6.
Yep.
So the zones are changing because the climate is changing. People who've been gardening for a long time, longer than I've been gardening, have been saying that things that they used to be able to grow, they can't grow plants that used to require a much longer growing season, they can grow now. Personally, I haven't really witnessed that much of a difference other than that the heat of the summer seems to be more intense, and I need to be out with a watering can more regularly, or to figure out ways of planting things that thrive in full sun, as opposed to things that, used to be part sun, part shade. Now it's almost like the heat is so intense, and the reflection from asphalt and the siding of your house or your fencing, that just, concentrates the heat and makes it that much more difficult for something that doesn't really thrive in a high heat environment to survive.
Right, right. How about you, Sarah? What are you seeing? What changes are you seeing in your backyard?
I think we have less snow cover totally in our area now. So that I think does affect the dormancy of some plants. I think also that the space of time between rainfalls in the summer and then the intensity of the rain that we do get. So we're going through this kind of drought, flood cycle a lot with plants. They like to count on an inch of water a week, and sometimes we don't get that, and sometimes we get 3. So it kind of makes it tricky. But I think the solution to some of that is to just make sure there's a huge amount of organic matter in your soil, which gets us back to compost.
Yes, it does. It does. How does explain more? You started it, finish
So
it now.
it acts more like a sponge. It absorbs more water and then holds more water, so there can be a reserve when the plants get thirsty and it gets as hot as Ronnie's mentioning, where they're all just parched and droopy. I see this with the rhododendron also in the winter. When it gets really cold and there's no snow cover, the leaves all kind of close in on themselves. You can tell the temperature when you just look outside at your rhododendron plants. And then when there is enough water and the sun's out and it's a little bit kinder to the plants, the leaves look more like they do on a normal day. The same thing happens in the summertime too. When it just gets too dry, the leaves all curl up to conserve moisture. And then finally rains, they open back up. So the plants kind of do know how to deal with some of this. But I think some of the changes are going to be a little rough on some of the things we've planted that didn't necessarily evolve here.
Right. And I'm seeing it already. I think cucumbers are having a hard time. Squash was having a hard time. One of the recommendations that we heard from an expert lecturing to us was to just plant later. There's no reason to plant a squash or cucumber before July in this zone anymore. That some of the bugs that go after it will die before then. Their cycle changes. And they don't need any more of a growing season than they're getting. I had irises in November this year, and they're beautiful. My lilacs were blooming at the end of October and early November. I don't know what's going to happen to them in the spring. What is going to happen to them in the spring, Ronnie?
Depends on what kind of winter we have and how late the winter goes and how early the spring comes, and if we have a spring. Last year we seemed to have more of a spring than in recent years, but sometimes we just go from the cold of winter right into 80-degree days, which is terrifying to us and to everything that's growing out there.
All growing things, yeah. I'm mostly concerned about forests that are disappearing, if not by wildfires because they're so dry, then to bugs that just eat trees until the entire species is gone. And we keep seeing these invasive animals come more and more. Can gardeners do anything about that? You have a problem with jumping worms, for example, in the compost garden. What do you do about those, Sarah? Asian jumping worms, adorable little things, not like your red wigglers.
Well, and these are horrible. They're
gross.
Science fiction nightmares. We kind of try to control them by hand. We'll if we see any, we'll put them in a plastic bag and let them cook on asphalt for a while until they're done, and then discard them. We have in the past used solarization, where we've plastic tarped areas of soil to attract the sunlight, to heat up the soil, to kill the worms. I keep hoping that there's going to be some predator that's going to come along and think that these are the tastiest things ever. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, can you explain what they do to soil? It's awful. You'd think they look so much like real worms. They don't act the same. They wiggle around and jump just like their name, but they look the same, similar, but they don't do the same thing in dirt.
So these are very vigorous, muscular, large worms, and they live in the top layer of the soil. They eat young plant shoots and roots. They eat leaf litter. So deforestation is going to be a problem when there isn't as much nutrition left on the forest floor for the trees. It's kind of a tricky thing. We have learned that they don't like dry mustard. And if you sprinkle dry mustard on the soil, it will cause them to try to escape and come up into the air, and that helps you able to grab them.
Oh, yuck. I'm getting the crawlies here. And of course, the other thing we can't do, and we don't do it in Albany now, is trade plants with one another that are in dirt that might have it. I took some plantings from a master gardener in Rensselaer County. Master gardeners are very generous with their extra plants, aren't they? And she pulled it out of the soil. We washed it in water. We put it dry, and I carried it home, washed them again, and put them in soil to make sure there were no eggs even of these worms that were any place near it. I have go ahead, Sarah.
The eggs will survive the winter. The adult worms will not, but the eggs will overwinter. So even if you have to be very careful about the plants that you get from nurseries or neighbors or master gardeners. And that's why I've kind of gone to planting from seeds.
Yeah, that's another good argument for a winter sowing. One last question. We're getting towards the end here. I want to ask about real indoor gardening, houseplants. My friend Barbara Nuffer, who is the Rensselaer County Master Gardener of the Year, has the most beautiful inside of the house I've ever seen. And I don't even know what her furniture looks like. I don't remember it. Amazing plants everywhere. I have trouble with philodendron. It's so hot and dry in here. It's hard to keep them alive. My African violets are hanging on by a thread. How do you guys do with that? Ronnie, do you have lots of, I'm not seeing it in your Zoom picture here, but do you have plants in your house?
Well, I am the proud owner of 4 houseplants. All of them have been given to me because I do not like houseplants. But these 4, because they have been given to me, I feel an incredible responsibility to take care of them, and hopefully they will thrive. But my absolute favorite houseplant that someone gave me 10 years ago is the clivia, and it is just starting to flower now. And it is an absolutely beautiful plant that starts flowering. Mine flowers like 4 times a year, and it needs to be root bound before it flowers. And wow. I do give it some compost tea, and it loves it. And usually within a few weeks, it starts flowering. The other plant that someone, a master gardener, gave me a few years ago is the night blooming cereus. It is the most incredibly ugly plant. It's called the ugly duckling of the cacti family. And once a year, it puts out a flower that starts blooming at sunset. And by dawn, the flower is gone. But within those 12 hours, it is the most magnificent flower with a scent that any perfume company, if they could duplicate it, they would be remarkably wealthy, because it is outstanding visually and aromatically. And
do you like stay up all night and invite people over on the night?
No, but people do. Yeah. Yeah, there's several different books. One of what is it? One of our favorite authors has a book where they celebrate a party that people are invited. You know when it's about to flower. You can usually tell 24 hours in advance it's going to flower. But people will have these parties that go for the whole night to celebrate them. I have never had one, but I usually stay up, well past my regular sleeping hour to watch it flower.
Just watching it. And how about you, Sarah? Do you have exotic indoor plants?
Couple. I bring in some herbs. I keep a rosemary plant in the kitchen, and some parsley. I try to keep thyme indoors because the outdoor thyme will eventually freeze and dry up, and I won't have any for culinary uses. I grow oats for the cat. About every other week, I start a new pot of oats for him. He's very happy. And it also helps me get my gardening therapy in.
That's really true. That's true. I approve of rosemary in the house. That's good. That's a good idea. I want to thank you both just prolifically for sharing your expertise freely with us here in this episode. And I want to end with a toast. And my toast today is to Mother Nature. We humans are not treating her well at this time. We have not appreciated the delicate balance and the fragility of her systems. We are over consuming, over engineering, and in general, just mucking with her. And she may be well on the way to teaching us a planetary lesson because of that. But I found that if you give her a chance the way you do, I'm trying to as a master garden every day, you will not believe how she rewards you. And like me, you're going to find yourself like taking close-up photos of caterpillar faces. I was doing that this summer, or fighting blackbirds for sunflower seeds that came out of this yellow disc bigger than my head that somehow came out of a tiny, tiny little speck of a seed. And there are other seeds that look like, pepper, like just something I'd put on my dinner to eat. And you put them in the ground. I can't even find them when I put them in the ground. And a few months later, there's this huge bush of color and birds buzzing around it and bees. It's just absolutely amazing. So I'm saying rip up your lawn, plop in some bulbs, and just sit back and await the magic. And if you do that, then like us, you're going to be toasting Mother Nature soon too. Thank you, everybody. As always, but especially as we are here wrapping up our initial 10 episodes of On the Brink, feeling our way, getting better and better, I think. I want to thank you all for sticking with us. You're telling us what we should do, what you think we should do, making suggestions, and I'm very grateful to you for that. I'm also really happy with and grateful to the sponsors who have been signing up. They've been supportive, they've been patient as we work out bugs. While I'm thanking people, I have to say the same to David Keckley for lending us his music, and to Dean Goldberg, who did Portrait for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to remind you that if you subscribe to On the Brink, not just listen to it, subscribe to it, or like it, or tell others about it, or best of all, if you rate it, if you give it 5 stars on Apple, that's the best, that's top. If you do that, you will help me game those pesky algorithms, because the more you act and do what I ask, the better chance I get of acquiring more sponsors and ultimately more big name panelists, more time frames to work in. Yes, those panelists do want to get paid. It's so pesky, as WAMC has found out. After this chapter, the one you just listened to, On the Brink is going to be going on a 2-week hiatus. Come on, you're too busy over the holidays to be listening anyway. And we have work to do. We're finishing up a new website where you will be able to interact with us. That means ask us questions, ream us out, whatever you want. You'll also be able to learn more about our guests. You'll see pictures. You'll find out more resources, for example, about the issues that we're talking about. You can even continue debating, maybe. You might find a blog from me. There's other features where, like I said, we're working on it. We're trying to do this right. And with your help, 2024 could mean fantastic programming on the most cutting edge of politics, science, health, maybe even Kim Kardashian. Okay, yes, I'm getting carried away. But sincerely, thank you for your support. Please stick with us. And On the Brink will be back. We hope you'll be too in the new year. Thank you.